Hello, listeners. This is Kat, and welcome back to Put Your Hands Up Podfics. This will be the continuation of Little Acts of Kindness. This will be Part 45, Chapter 45, entitled Todoroki Issues. Izuku could feel it, the bond with Ida. It was on that edge point, where he would trust Ida enough to gain his quirk. Izuku didn't want to copy his only friend's quirk, though, for a multitude of reasons. One, he didn't want Ida to react negatively, but also, Engine was a quirk that ran through the Ida family. If Izuku copied the quirk, it was like he was stealing a part of that family's legacy. He looked around the room. It was dark, late at night. He had woken up from a nightmare of native dying. His thoughts and guilt plaguing him had stopped him from returning to sleep. Closing his eyes, he did his best to relax, to feel for the bonds. Then, with only a moment of hesitation, he severed the cord that was reaching out from the bubble Izuku associated with Ida. Immediately, he could feel the difference. The last of his wariness of trusting Ida went away. Izuku froze as a realization came over him. By not severing the bonds, he was making it harder on himself to trust his classmates. Focusing, he looked at the other bonds belonging to his classmates, like Uraraka's pink orb. He paused, before severing the bond. Again, he could feel the difference, the ever-present wariness disappearing. Slowly he went through his classmates, until only a few of them were left. Tokiyami, Todoroki, and Kaminari. "What are you doing?" A voice called out, causing Izuku to instinctively flinch away as he opened his eyes, only to see Todoroki looking at him from the other hospital bed. Nothing, Izuku said. The dual-haired boy tilted his head. It clearly wasn't nothing. You seemed to be concentrating heavily. Izuku bit his lip. I was making it so I didn't copy your quirks. Todoroki's frown deepened. Your quirk is bonding, right? Sensei mentioned that you could copy quirks after meeting a requirement. He nodded. Why are you making it so you don't copy our quirks, then? Wouldn't doing so just make you more powerful? I have a limit to how many I can copy. So you're making it so you only get the strongest quirks? Izuku shook his head frantically. No, I don't want to steal any of your quirks. Todoroki stared at him, before nodding a bit. So you don't want to use others' quirks? Izuku nodded. Not without their permission. But you haven't asked us if it was okay? The boy questioned, confused. He fiddled with his hands for a moment before whispering. I don't want someone to only be my friend to have their quirk copied. Todoroki's eyebrows scrunched together. So, your quirk requires you to be friends with someone to work? No, but friendship and the requirement kind of go hand in hand, or at least, for me it does. I see. Have you stopped all of them, then? Not yet. You interrupted me. I'm sorry, then. But I think I understand where you're coming from a bit, at least. You know my father's endeavor, the second greatest hero of all time, my dad. He's the powerful bastard who only thinks of becoming a stronger hero. He wants to surpass All Might. He's always gone all out to make a name for himself as a hero, yet to him All Might has always been a roadblock, stopping him from being the #1 hero. My father realized he could never beat All Might as a hero, so he created another plan. Izuku tilted his head, wondering where Todoroki was going with his story. Quirk marriages. You've heard of them, right? They started becoming a problem during the second or third generation after quirks appeared. Strong individuals would choose a partner and force them into marriage, for the sole purpose of passing on a strengthened version of their own quirk. Those earlier generations were lacking in ethics. With his wealth and fame, my father made my mother's family agree to the marriage, all to get his hands on her quirk. Endeavor raised me as a hero who would exceed All Might, just to fulfill his own ambitions. Todoroki scowled, looking at his left hand. I hate it, being no more than a tool for that human garbage. Todoroki paused, his hand raising to cover his face. As I remember it, Mom was always crying. I'm sorry I failed you, she cried, before throwing scalding water in my face. Izuku shuddered as he stared at the boy, sympathy creeping through him. It must have been a nightmare to have his own mom hurt him like that, all because he reminded her of Endeavor. In short, not using my left side was my revenge on him. Never using my rotten father's quirk. No. By rising to the top without using it, I'll have denied him everything. Todoroki turned away. So, if you don't want to use a quirk that doesn't belong to you, I can understand that. I wish I hadn't been born with my father's quirk. Even if it came from your father, it's yours now. If you have the power to save people with it, will you refuse to save them just despite your father? Izuku questioned after a moment of silence. Todoroki's head snapped to him, eyes narrowed. I will save people with only my ice. Izuku curled up into himself, even as he murmured. We failed to save Native. He died because we weren't good enough. Todoroki turned away. The room fell silent for a long time. Izuku eventually managed to fall back asleep, forgetting to finish severing the bonds of the other classmates. He woke up to see the white of the hospital above him. Slowly he sat up and saw Todoroki and Ida were already awake. Good morning, Midoriya, Ida said, nodding his head, which had bandages covering half of it. Both of his arms were also bandaged and in slings. Izuku looked over and saw Todoroki only had his left arm bandaged. Glancing at himself, he noticed one of his arms was in a cast, but that was it. Todoroki looked at Ida. I came to save you, but ended up needing your help. Sorry. Not? The door opened. Oh, the little wounded warriors are awake, Gran Torino said, being followed by Manuel and a large man with a dog mutation, or was a dog with a quirk of some sort. I'm still going to chew you out, but before that you've got a visitor. With that, they were introduced to the Hosu chief of police, who informed them of the hero killer's condition before scolding them about using their quirks without permission. Then they were given a choice, to receive credit but face punishment, or to not receive credit and to give it to other heroes on scene who had agreed to take the credit to protect the kids. Izuku spoke up first. I'm planning to be an underground hero, so I don't want the credit, but... Izuku looked over at Ida and Todoroki. Ida and Todoroki bowed, apologizing for the inconvenience. With that, it was agreed that none of them would receive credit for taking down Stain. Still, it was nice, at least, that the chief of police thanked them. After the chief left, Gran Torino ranted for a good half an hour at them about how foolish and stupid their decision had been. After he ran out of steam, he offered a brief congratulations for not dying, and then left. Then they were left alone with their thoughts. An hour or two passed, and they were eating some of the bland hospital food, but otherwise just resting up, as they weren't allowed to leave for a couple days. There was a knock on the door, and the students looked at each other before Todoroki and him looked at Ida, silently electing him as a spokesperson. Come in, Ida called out. The door opened, revealing a surprising figure, Enji Todoroki. More commonly known as Endeavor, but the number 2 hero wasn't in his hero outfit, instead in civilian wear. Khakis and a button-up shirt that was untucked. Shoto, he greeted, nodding at his son before looking over at them with sharp blue eyes. May I have a moment alone with my son? Todoroki-san questioned. Todoroki crossed his arms. Whatever you want to say can be said in front of them. Todoroki-san nodded. Very well. When will you stop throwing a tantrum? Todoroki glared. I'm not. Refusing to use your fire just because of me is childish. How else could it be described than you throwing a fit? Shoto, you are my son. You have the perfect quirk to save people and to take down villains. How can you throw away half of your potential simply because you don't like me? I don't simply not like you. I hate you, Todoroki responded, with clenched hands. Izuku watched, seeing how Todoroki-san's eyes flashed, an unknown emotion going through them. Pain? Sadness? Izuku couldn't tell, but it seemed like those words hurt the number 2 hero. Please, Shoto, forget about me for a moment and think about your career. Do you plan on letting people die by not using the fire that belongs to you? Todoroki glared, refusing to respond, and Todoroki-san sighed, turning to leave. If you don't want to be a hero, Shoto, I won't force you to. With that statement, the number 2 hero left. Ida frowned. Todoroki, what was all that about, if you don't mind me asking? Todoroki remained silent for a moment. I hate my father, because he abused me and my family. He forced my mom into a quirk marriage, and he hurt us for the sake of making us heroes. He called it training. My oldest brother died due to his training, and because my brother and sister refused to be heroes, he focused all his attention on training me. Oh, does that mean that you want to be a hero? If you didn't, Ida asked, looking hesitant and unsure. Todoroki stared down at his hands. I don't know. Enji leaned against the wall, listening to the conversation between his son and the 2 other UA students. Forced my mom into a quirk marriage. Is that really what Shoto thought? that he bought Ray from her family just for her quirk. Just that very thought of doing such to his wife made him feel sick. He would never have forced her to marry him. He loved her too much for that. Yet, in the end, he still caused her misery. It was his fault that she felt like she couldn't talk to him about the problems she was having. She thought he would be angry at her for not being able to bear another child, and she would never be angry at her. He had come to learn recently that being a hero and being a father were two very different things. Fuyumi had broken down, yelling and screaming at him for tearing their family apart, calling him an abuser and that she wished she had never been born. It broke his heart to see her in such a state, to realize that she was like this because of him, because he didn't know how to be a good father. He had to admit her to the same psych ward her mother was in, and he couldn't bring himself to visit her, not after realizing what he had caused. Instead, he had the doctors give flowers with his apologies about being unable to make it. Now he was left to himself, trying to figure out if it was possible to make it up to his family, but I hate you. Maybe that wasn't possible. Maybe it would be better to remove himself from them. If his influence over them was such a dark presence, then if he removed it, would that allow them to bloom into the people they were meant to be? Angie turned and walked down the halls out of the hospital. What should I do, Ray? How can I make it up to your children? He murmured out loud in the halls. One thing he knew, he didn't deserve to call them his children, not when he was such a source of misery to them. All right, listeners, this concludes Chapter 45 of Little Acts of Kindness. Chapter 46 will be up next. Hope you all are still enjoying this one, and as always, thank you so much for listening.